Okay, good afternoon everyone. So this is a short video about basically radon measurement and the sort of like a comparison, if you like, between passive measurement and real-time measurement. Okay, so before I get into that, I just want to quickly make this point that the main reason, we're very experienced radon measurer and radon mitigation provider. And our main business is ventilation retrofits. We're very experienced in fixing problems caused by insufficient ventilation performance, so mold, condensation, radon, odours, you name it. And it's worth saying at this point that the reason why, or a main reason why radon builds up in millions of British properties where there's, if they're in a hotspot area, relates to the performance of the ventilation strategy in the property. Most properties in this country are built with natural background ventilation, which is an inherently ineffective and inefficient process. So basically, if you have to open windows or rely on air bricks and trickle vents, you rarely, if ever, get the level of ventilation performance required. It has to, background ventilation should be continuous, and obviously there are other consequential problems like uncontrolled heat loss that go with that. And in our experience, if you're in a radon hotspot area, you typically see a lot of fluctuation in radon levels between the warm months and the colder months. But if you could see the radon fluctuation on a daily basis, you'd see similar sort of things. And it really, there's a big correlation between whether natural ventilation, if the property is naturally ventilated, whether that's enabled or not. And it's really worth bearing that in mind, because there's some, if you look at some of the websites, for example, one of the websites even mentions that ventilation won't necessarily reduce radon levels. Well, in our experience, ventilation performance is an essential method at diluting and displacing radon concentrations. And if your natural ventilation processes are effective, then that usually is beneficial. So I just wanted to put that there now. So just quickly go through the sort of usual, what we call the passive approach, where you take little black sensors. You might get them from UK HSA or other providers. But basically these are sensors with no electronics in them. And they have to be located inside the house, and they have to be left there for some period of time, maybe a few days, but usually 3 months. Now, this is quite important because if you look at the action level, what the action level is, the radon action level for domestic properties, the action level is 200 becquerels per cubic metre. But that is based on the annualised average. So it's not a daily average or a monthly, it's the annualised concentration. So if you get a measurement service, the service providers will give you an annualised calculation based on a long-term exposure. So obviously the longer that you can leave the sensors in place, the more perhaps precise the extrapolation to an annualised average might be. And obviously it also takes into consideration seasonal fluctuations as well. So basically this is the sort of generally accepted approach to radon measurement. It is the official way of doing it. I think it's a very reliable method. Myself, my company, we provide a lot of passive measurement services, but there are some issues with it, in my opinion, and I just want to quickly summarise those. So firstly, the data that you get back is just long-term averages. So whatever the period of exposure, you just get a single number that tells you the average. And what you don't see within that, you don't see any of the fluctuations. You don't see daily fluctuations or ranges or anything like that. And that is obviously quite important. So let's say, for example, if your level comes back after 3 months and it's very close to the action level but just beneath it, say 185 becquerels per cubic metre, and the action level is 200 in a domestic home. So you're going to think that the annualised average is okay, but you may also think that there might be periods where, significant periods where actually the levels might be well above that 200 becquerels per cubic metre threshold. And obviously that's one of the problems that our customers talk to us about when we talk about measurement. many of the customers that I deal with want to know that the levels are safe pretty much all the time, or ideally as close to all the time as you can get, rather than just being on a sort of like long-term average basis. And I think that's quite an important point to consider. Okay. The other thing I think is worth mentioning is, obviously, if you're measuring over 10 days or 3 months, whatever it may be, I think that it's worth considering that passive sensors can be repositioned. Basically, the data can be manipulated. You can take a sensor, someone can take it and put it by an open window, for example, without telling the company that placed it there. And obviously, there is a risk of that, which is unavoidable unless you're actually going to sit there and watch it all the time. This point about it can be manipulated remains. Probably doesn't happen at all, but it's worth considering. Okay. And then the third point I think it's worth mentioning is that passive measurement packs usually comprise 2 sensor devices. One that's you're told to place it in the living room, and then the second one you're told to place it in the bedroom. Now, in our experience, obviously every property is usually different, but it simply means that you may not have enough sensors to cover all the risk areas, and this I think can be quite relevant if the more complex your property is, especially if you have cellar spaces or lots of a very complex array of rooms on the ground floor and or first floor. So these are points that I think are relevant in passive measurement, and it's worth considering those. Now, real-time measurement is possible through real-time devices. There are many of them available on the open market. All sorts of consumer sort of oriented products, relatively cheap. And what they do is they give you a sort of display of the radon level at that time. So that's slightly different, obviously, to the passives, where there is no display. You have to send it off to a lab to get it analysed, and then they'll tell you the results afterwards. So the real time obviously shows you the results on a far, far shorter time frame. Now, I need to say at this point that obviously real-time measurement is not official. It's not included in guidance. There is no official guidance relating to this. But obviously there are lots and lots of products available in the market, and many customers use them. We use them ourselves because obviously the fact that you can get an idea what radon levels might be using them, I think it's quite helpful in that context. But it must be said that if you're going to be using a real-time device, it is not a substitute for official passive measurement. Firstly, at this moment in time, there is no official guidance for it. And secondly, you should really look at whether your device has been calibrated or not. If you're looking at if you want the numbers to be as reliable as possible. I always advise our customers when we provide any type of real-time measurement service that it should only be used as an indicative, unofficial value. But the fact that it provides data immediately compared to an approach where you won't see any data for a number of months or weeks, I think is beneficial. Okay. So what are the benefits of real-time measurement? Well, like I've just said, firstly, the results are usually available through the display immediately. And depending on the sort of service you provide, you can see fluctuations with the real-time radon devices, which I think is also quite important. Many of the products come with some sort of app-type functionality and some sort of short-term data capture, and you can see ranges over a period of time, which I think is also quite helpful. But I'll reiterate again, it's unofficial, especially if it's uncalibrated. So you should not be considering this to be the official value. It's just indicative, in my view. And obviously, some devices can be way out. For your information, incidentally, we have some pretty reliable data on consumer devices that we received a presentation basically one of the radon days, and some of them are pretty reliable, other ones aren't, but it's just one of those things. One must just always be prepared to understand that the data is unofficial and should not be used as any substitute for the official values you might get from passive results. Okay. Another, I suppose, potential benefit of real-time measurement is that depending on what you're doing in your surveys, you can see the effect of changes to, say, ventilation performance pretty much immediately. And this, I think, is very relevant. In our business, when we provide services to customers who have these real-time measurements, quite often they will come to us telling us and showing us what the values are before they speak with us. And then once we've gone through mitigation, they will then show us the data afterwards. And it's very, very clear that the reductions they're seeing post mitigation installation are obviously due to the fact that we have our mitigations are have resulted in those reductions. And obviously, the radon mitigations for any type of retrofit is some sort of ventilation process. Okay, so I think this is highly relevant. I think that it's a horses for courses type situation. Firstly, and to finally reiterate again, passive measurement is currently the official way of measuring radon. Real-time devices should be, can be used. In my view, it can provide clarity where clarity is needed in the short term, but it should only really be used as sort of like indicative. If you really do need precise information, obviously one needs to do the passive approach. But real-time measurements can give indicative values, which I think are quite helpful. So I think that in the weeks and months to come, I think that real-time measurement has its place and may well find, you may find guidance appearing at some point in this regard. Because obviously there are millions of products out there on the market right now. But that's really the kind of message I wanted to get across. Horses for courses. Real time will provide information, certain information you just can't get with the passive approach. The passive approach is official, and hopefully that's it. If anyone's got any questions, let us know. Thank you.